In this video, I'm going to cover the breakdown of a prototype and blockout process I am using to create a modular asset pack, primarily on how to start, get in the sizes and the scale for your modular environment creation, and the workflow I am currently using. So let's get into it. First is the problem that I experienced and many others go through when they're trying to work on a modular asset pack. And the biggest thing holding most back is starting on such a project because you think you need so many different meshes to create so you can expand on a larger environment. And when you get the idea of creating something that could become a large explorable environment, the amount of work that you think you need to do to start with usually holds people back, and they just don't start because they think they need a lot of different meshes to create. So the first thing is, once you have an idea, once you know what you want to create, the key is to ask yourself, what's the smallest part of the environment you can create with the smallest amount of workable assets to showcase it before you expand on to the rest, the bigger environment. So don't think that you need to create a large, huge environment with hundreds of different modular assets. Instead, create a small section, a small room that uses the minimal amount of those assets to create that space. Because you can always add different variations and expand on them later. You just need to figure out what's the smallest amount of modular assets I need to create the smallest environment space with those assets. So now, instead of creating hundreds of different variations that go into a bigger environment, you might only need 10 different pieces to create a smaller section of the room. And then those are the ones that are going to be used to create more variations within it. And this idea of creating the smallest workable space came from business product development. There was a term called MVP, minimal viable product. And for me, I changed that to MVE, minimal viable environment. And what MVP, or minimal viable product, is a version of a product that a company or an individual would develop with just enough features to be usable by early customers, who then provide feedback for future product development that you can add on top. Now, in this case, you're not going to be releasing and getting feedback from a customer just yet. The customer is you, the creator. So you just need enough of modular assets to be able to get feedback for yourself on scale, on theme, and be able to create the smallest possible space with the smallest amount of modular assets. So focus on building a small prototype of that small area with the minimal amount of modular assets before expanding on a bigger environment. And this is where the workflow process I am going to show you comes in extremely useful. So for this current idea, I want to create living spaces. The theme is futuristic sci-fi livable space. So this could be apartments, some kind of a resort area, maybe a hotel, something that could have interior spaces of a room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and maybe you could expand it to a living room. And you could have these sections, these blocks that you could duplicate over and over again to create a larger environment. There might be an outside area, there might be some kind of a courtyard area, but instead of focusing on trying to create all those different modular assets, I decided to only focus on a single room. Because I know if I can create that, and have modular pieces for walls, for windows, for doorways, floor, ceiling, then I could always add variation to those pieces so I can have the rest of the environment created fairly easy. I just need to figure out what the size, the dimensions for this one single space, for this one single room would be. And with that, I started this process in Maya because I need to figure out the sizes so I can begin to export from Maya into UE5 and wrap my head around the visual prototyping of walking around in this space. Will this space work, and what kind of sizes for the modular assets, the initial pieces that I need? So I have Maya open and I have an initial scene set up. This is the one that I always start with, and I already have a scale box as well as UE4 scale human mannequin inside the scene to help me judge proportion and size. I have a tutorial on this, on how to bring one of these mannequins into Maya or any other 3D application that you could check out. And then I also have my grid changed with the following settings. So if I go to display, grid options, here's what I have it set to. And I also have a tutorial on what all these values mean and what they do if you want to go in depth on that. And then I also have a scene in UE5. This is a basic map template. So if you go to file and your level, it's this basic map with a couple of additional changes being made. So I have a UE4 mannequin inserted in here, also used for scale and judging dimensions. as well as a post-process volume where I have exposure changed. So I don't have that light and dark constant adjustment taking place. And also I have a couple of tutorials on the Mannequin on how to insert one, as well as for how to control the post-process volume auto exposure and essentially disable it. And I will link all of these tutorials in the description to the video as well as within the blog post. Alright, so now with those two things set up, I begin my initial early prototyping blockout process. To begin, you need to establish your standard wall height, depth, and width. This will vary from environment to environment, so for you, these values might be different. In my case, since this is going to be a livable space, similar to a standard room, a good height for such a space is 300 by 300. And again, I may modify it, all depends how it feels inside the engine, but this is what I usually start with. So I create a cube and I change my width and my height to 300, and depth, good depth for a standard wall size for such a space is 20. And then let me change my height balance to -1. And this is my beginning basic building block for a wall, which also will be used for a floor, ceiling, initial window, and a doorway. So this building block will be expanded to other modular pieces. And you should keep the wall, the floor, the ceiling, the window, and the doorway the same size. So that way they can be swapped out and they match. The floor will match to the wall, the floor will match to the ceiling, to the doorway. But I also don't know this measurement for sure because I just need to prototype it. And again, your sizes might be 400 by 400, maybe 300 by 400. Maybe you're building a larger environment, and in that case, it might be a standard wall size 500 by 500. So you're gonna have to test this out and establish that initial standard block for your modular assets. So once I have a standard wall created, that's it. I just need to begin to use this and duplicate it. So I'm going to position this one right here. I'm simply going to duplicate a piece. And then now, because I've used whole values for this, these values will work great for UE5 or UE4, and they will fall to the grid lines that Unreal Engine uses. You could have smaller values, so you could have maybe 310, 320, but I tend to avoid going that small to start with. I usually stick to whole values and larger numbers. I may go in the 50s, so 350 by 350 could work, all depends. But this early on, I tend to just stay with the whole values, 300, 400, 500. And then I could always add variations in between for half values or something close. But this will ensure that you stay on the grid in Maya as well as on the grid in UE5. So I begin to block out using this standard wall size for the room that I'm thinking of, which is just a small livable space. So I create a couple of walls. I already have a layout in mind. So I try to duplicate that in Maya first. So I actually create the entire layout using this simple building block, the standard wall, and I block out this entire space in Maya. Now you could export this piece and try to do the same thing in UE5, but the workflow I'm currently using, I really like just creating the initial layout, the entire thing in Maya first, and then export everything into UE5. And that's what I've been doing for most of the modular asset pieces I create. So I just simply take and I make sure just stay on the grid as I duplicate these pieces. And then I need to establish my floor so I know how far to go. So I duplicate this piece and I use it for the floor. And again, you want to stick to the same size for the floor and the ceiling. So they fit, the wall and the floor and the ceiling, they'll fit. So I'm just simply going to duplicate this a few times and make sure I snap to the grid. And maybe one more time. So what I'm thinking here, I'm visualizing, this is going to be probably the kitchen area, and this is probably going to be like a small room. So let's take all of these and I just duplicate them again, snap them, and I just continue this layout, maybe taking these two and block out this entire small livable space right inside Maya. Again, I take this wall, I rotate it, and I create the side pieces, the side walls, and I just continue doing this until I have a bigger layout. And here's my small initial layout blocked out and prototyped. I did a small adjustment to the floor. Instead of having 4 pieces, I did 3. Again, I'm comparing everything right now. I haven't even exported this into UE5 to test, but I'm comparing everything to the scale reference I have, and it really helps to judge how big this livable space would need to be. And I made a small adjustment to the wall, to the 300 piece wall. I created a half size of 150 because I thought maybe some parts here I may want to, like for this one, I may want to have a window only in the center of the room instead of maybe 2 windows on each side. So I basically created a piece that's 150 by 300 in height. So 150 in width, 300 in height, and same depth. And I just kind of included, maybe it's going to be a wall to separate the kitchen and the livable space. And then I kind of blacked out the area for where the bathroom is going to be, and maybe a small closet. So right now I have everything to see if this is something I want to kind of expand on, or maybe I need to make it bigger, maybe make it smaller. So in this part right here, I want to go ahead and export this, bring this into UE5 and walk around then and see, is this something that I like? Is this the space that I'm going for? And I just need to see it from the player's point of view. So to quickly export this and bring this in for testing, you just select all the meshes, go to File, Export Selection. And I briefly covered this process when I did the comprehensive breakdown of making of the globe staircase. So I'm using a very similar approach. I take all the meshes, export them as FBX, and then here are my settings. Smoothing groups enabled, smooth mesh, and then I give it a name. Let me jump over to the export the meshes. I already have a file here, futuristic room size test. So I'm just simply going to override it and save all these meshes inside a single FBX file. So I'm going to export selection. And yeah, I'm going to override it. So this is going to be our test scene to start with. Now in UE5, in this test scene map, I'm just simply going to bring in all the meshes. Here is the single FBX file. And I have a test folder, and I'm just going to bring it into the static meshes folder. And I'm going to left click, hold and drag that FBX file right into this folder. The important properties I enable here are at the moment, this early on, I do not generate any missing collisions. I want to be able to freely walk around and not have to deal with any collision being auto-generated. The rest of the settings are default. One important setting that you want to make sure is disabled is combine meshes. I do not want to combine meshes into a single mesh. I could, but I like to keep them separate. And then I do want to create a test material right here on the material import method, create new material. This will simply create a flat shader to see, so I don't see this grid, this world grid being applied. And it will be this nice off-white color, which is more pleasing on the eyes. And then that's it. I import all. The most important part in this prototype and blockout process is I do not save any meshes and I do not save the map. This is only for quick testing of size, of scale, to see if I like the size of the space that I am creating. So with all the meshes that I have, I'm simply going to select them all, minus this Lambert material that gets created. This it's a material that has all this flat shader for all the static meshes already applied for us. So I have that deselected, and I'm simply going to drag all the meshes together into the scene, and you can see that the entire layout is reconstructed for me. And the last thing I want to do inside the properties in the details panel for all the selected meshes, as long as they're still all selected, I'm going to zero out the location and set them all to 0. So if I move anything, I can always bring that piece of geometry back to its original location. If you don't, it'll make it a little harder for you if you happen to move it. But again, this is only a prototype process, so it's not a big deal if anything gets messed up. And now I can just take a look at it, see if this is the layout that I want. And let's go ahead and spawn. I'm gonna right click anywhere because we don't have any collisions, so we don't have to be inside of it. I'm gonna play from here, and I'm using first person game template. So I'm just gonna go inside the space and just look around, and it feels good. I really like this, and it feels the size that I'm going for. And then let me walk into this imaginary bathroom, and I'm visualizing of if this is a good size, where I may include a bathtub and a sink and a toilet. If this small living room area is good for a bed, kitchen, this would be a doorway. And yep, I like this layout, and I am good with continuing blocking the rest of this out by prototyping more, including the doorway, including a window, and then adding smaller props, basic building blocks to see if the livable space can sustain and contain those. So right now, I will select all of all the futuristic room, all the static meshes that I inserted, and I remove them from the level. I delete them. And then I select all the static meshes that I imported, including the material, and I hit delete, and I delete them. Completely removing them. Again, this was only for the quick prototype, so I can just see the space and the size of it. The next step is I want to see how the windows look at the doorways and maybe cut out for the closet. So what I do is I just simply insert a bunch of edges and I begin to cut things out. So I go to modeling tool, go to multi-cut, and I just insert kind of a general area for the door. And it's going to be cut into the piece of for the standard wall. So it's all going to be modular and fit. So then I delete it and just block out a simple walkable area for the door. Maybe let's just get a little bit more straight. I'm not being very accurate at this point for the door itself. This is all going to be done more accurately later on when I'm actually creating the modular pieces. For the window, again, maybe let's select and just kind of black out where the window opening is going to be. So let's extrude that with an offset, delete it, and then just bridge those two edges to create the geometry. Okay, a quick block out. And then I need another doorway for where the bathroom would be. So I just simply take this, duplicate it, rotate it, because I know it'll fit in between, so I can quickly snap it right there. And then last thing, let's do the same thing for where the closet would be. Again, I just want to see if the size, the opening for the closet would work. Something like that. Let's delete, small face right here on the bottom. And again, just bridge all of these together. So I quickly blocked out the openings. And then I select everything again and go to File, Export Selection, overwrite this existing file FBX. Back in UE5, I'm going to bring that in. Same exact settings as before, import everything. Ignore all the errors, I don't care about them. Drag everything in again, all the meshes. Give it a second to initialize so they are placed. Zero everything out again, so they're all in 000 world space. Easier to work, and reposition them back and spawn. And see if this space works. And it does. Kind of opens it up a little bit more. Good walkable area. And I'm visualizing what the future possible props may go in here. Will I have space? And it looks like I will. Also, you may want to do a quick test for the ceiling. So in this case, I don't want to go back to Maya and having to re-export. What I could do is maybe select these pieces for the floor and just move them up to see how it feels with the ceiling. Because once you introduce the ceiling, the space changes. So I'm going to just simply select them and duplicate them, move them on top. And let's insert the light in here really quick. And just raise it up. And I'm going to spawn. Walk in. And again, see in the space if the 300 height works. And it does. So I like this space. It's working. And again, this entire process so far has taken me a very short amount of time. And it really speeds up the entire prototyping Blockout process using this method. Then the next step is to see how basic building blocks for props would go in and if there's enough space for everything to kind of fit in. So again, I would go back to Maya, but before I do, I am going to select all the meshes, delete them from the level first. So select the light. And then also delete everything from the content browser. And go back to Maya. Here I went ahead and already blocked out the furniture and where it's going to go using basic primitive shapes. Nothing but boxes, cylinders. So essentially I have kitchen cabinets, a fridge, table, some chairs, nightstands, bed, possible TV and another cabinet, as well as the bathroom area. Bathtub, sink, toilet. And then I also included a doorway. Or a door within a doorway. And then let me go ahead and put the ceiling on top. I just took the floors, duplicated. I'm going to zero these out. And now I want to prototype and test this and how it looks. And kind of judge the space with all the possible blocked out furniture inside it. So again, the process is extremely simple. I'm going to select everything, go to File, Export Selection, overwrite the existing file I had, the FBX. And I'm just gonna drag that FBX file over into that same folder. In this case, let's test something else out. This early on, you could combine meshes, and as long as you don't have any collisions, you'll be able to walk inside them. So that way you have just a single mesh. So this is another option you could use. Again, we're not saving anything. This is a quick prototype blockout process. It really doesn't matter. So in this case, I'm gonna combine meshes. Let's import all. I'll have one single mesh with a material, and I'm just gonna take this and drag it. In this case, because we have ceiling, let me go ahead and insert a light and just raise it up. And let me move it so we have our scale reference inside the scene. And then let me go ahead and spawn and walk into this interior. So as I'm looking around, this feels pretty good. Again, I'm not really too much concerned with the size of the furniture in terms of if it's correct scale or not. This was a quick blockout, and as long as it kind of resembles similar size and dimensions of what will eventually go there, I'm okay with it. Plus, I may not even include this rounded table. I may do something else. So I'm not too worried about the actual detail of if it's accurate at this point. I just want to gauge the size of everything together and visualize the space. And it is working. It is what I'm going for. And let's go in the bathroom. That feels pretty good. And let's take a look at the closet. That's pretty good as well. So this space right here, right now, is what I would want to create. I have the modular pieces. I know they will work. I have the basic standard building block, which is going to be 300 by 300. And the space that I created will work for my idea. And it will fit all the furniture and it will look good. And I can always expand further to other rooms. But again, focusing on that smallest environmental space first without expanding to larger pieces outside of it, so you are overwhelmed of how much you have to create. You just focus on this area alone and that's it. Because from here you can expand to different variations of static meshes, introduce different windows, maybe introduce double the size for the walls, create a lot more props. So you have a lot of different variations you can introduce because you've established this initial space. And at this point, I am very happy with everything how it turned out. And back in Maya, I would now focus on actually creating the individual wall, the individual doorway, maybe the half size for the wall, then for the floor and the ceiling, and beginning to create the initial modular asset pack with these minimal amount of meshes first. This now becomes my blueprint, my template. So this early prototype and blockout process for modular environments is something that I've been using, and I find it extremely quick to get things going. So you're not overwhelmed or not know where to start because you're thinking of this grand space, but instead you're just focused on the smallest possible space with the initial set of modular meshes. Now, this is just one way to prototype and block out your environments, and the one I tend to be using right at this moment, and I really like it. But there are other ways you can block out your environments. And for that, you can check out the tutorial, 3 methods to block out environments in UE5 to see what other methods you could use. And if you are looking for more in-depth courses that take you from beginning to end to teach you all the steps of modeling and UVing in Maya, or beginning to use Unreal Engine 5 completely from scratch, or if you've been using Unreal Engine 5, then showing you how to construct an environment with the existing set of static meshes that are provided with the course, I have a set of courses that will take you through many steps of the process so you can become the best environment artist. So take a look at the available courses so you can begin to learn how to create your own environments.